Hey, 7th grade, Mr. Hildebrand here. I wanted to post this lesson. This week is test week. We do that on Friday, we have our test. And as always, I like to get a little bit of review in as a class, and we can kind of pool our knowledge collectively and study a little bit. So yesterday and today, we were going over the study guide and then covering a couple tough topics that we knew would be on the test. Okay. So today we learned about Homer. Okay, he was that yesterday we learned about Homer. He was that ancient Greek poet who wrote two famous books, the Iliad and the Odyssey. The Iliad, remember, was about the Trojan War, the Greeks versus the Trojans. And then the Odyssey is about the hero Odysseus and his trip home. Okay. We talked about, why are the Greeks and Trojans fighting according to Homer? How did that war start? And, Homer tells us it's about a princess, right? Who, in his version of the story, is kidnapped by a Trojan prince, named Paris. We also talked about the ancient Greeks and how they loved to achieve, whether it be sports, the military, math, science, physics, art, theater. The Greeks worked really, really hard, and that was to impress their gods and goddesses. They thought the gods and goddesses would be honored, by humans, working so hard to be almost godlike. We also talked about Socrates and a little bit about his life. Remember, he was the philosopher who asked all the big, important questions. Nothing was off the table. He would ask about anything. And we talked about he was executed because of those questions. Right? The people in Athens, they thought he was maybe challenging the authority. They didn't like that he asked questions about religion. He asked questions about the government. They accused him of denying the gods, brainwashing the kids, starting a rebellion. And when he was defending himself, he was talked about goodness and truth and how he was, trying to learn, trying to grow, and refused to stop teaching. And so they executed him. We also talked about oracles, how oracles were, in ancient Greek religion, they were people that the ancient Greeks thought could talk to gods. And they also believed that the oracles would give prophecies, which is kind of like telling the future. Today, we talked about the modern and ancient Olympics, how they are similar, how they're different. We broke that down a little bit. And then we also talked about the theater, how it's the same or how it's different. And then some major accomplishments for some of the ancient Greek people that we learned about. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. And then we kind of worked through a couple people on these lists. Now, folks, we did make a couple charts, and it's great to put information on your study guide here. I didn't fill in all the questions here, but it'd be a great resource to use if you need a refresher or you get stuck on the test. But we also made some charts. I kind of made some makeshift ones here in Word. Ours we drew on paper or on the board. But for example, when we're breaking down the ancient Greek Olympics and modern sports, or the modern Olympics, we know that in the ancient Greek Olympics, only men competed. We also know that only Greek citizens competed. So you had to be from an ancient Greek city. We know that they only had several sports, and I'm going to probably leave one out here, but we know they had wrestling. We know they had racing, like foot races. We know they threw the discus. We know they had the javelin throw. They had pancratium, which is like mixed martial arts. And there may have been a handful of other ones that I'm forgetting now, but we talked about in class. And then the big one that a lot of people like to bring up is that they competed nude, especially in these foot races. They thought that clothes would slow them down. So they competed in the nude. And so obviously we're talking about some blatant differences here. Okay, our modern sports and modern Olympics, we have uniforms. We have men and women competing. The modern Olympics, it's represented as athletes from all over the world. Not just ancient Greece, or not just Greece. Okay. And then obviously there's a greater variety in sports. We still have a lot of those ancient Greek sports, and they still happen in the Olympics, but we have a lot more as well. Now, we also wanted to talk about the theater, because we know that plays, or at least a lot of the tradition in theater came out of ancient Greece. We talked about in ancient Greece how they had comedies, and those were funny plays to make people laugh. We talked about how they had tragedies. Those were sad plays. We talked about, again, this is ancient Greece, we talked about there were only male actors. Only male actors, even for female roles. Even for female roles, it was played by a man. We talked about how they used their costumes and masks to show age, gender, emotions of the characters. Modern theater, we talked about, hey, we still have comedies, we still have tragedies, right? Those are some common themes there. But obviously we have actors and actresses. It's not just men who are doing the acting, but women are also in those roles as well. We talked about the transition, as technology changes. Okay, now obviously we have, something I forgot to add to this one, but we did talk about in class, is the open air theaters. The open air theaters. And obviously we have indoor theaters now. There are open air ones as well, but we have indoor theaters. Obviously we have new technology when it comes to sound, right? Sound quality. So we have microphones, we have speakers, the invention of the video camera and film changed it. Then we started getting movies and TV, right? Now we're even up to the day and age where we're streaming things online. So obviously a lot has changed, but some of the early traditions are still there. We talked a little bit about Socrates. He was the guy who asked a lot of questions. We know that he was accused of brainwashing children. He was accused of denying the gods and starting a rebellion. We know that he was executed for it. They forced him to drink poison. Plato, we know, was his student, Socrates' student. We talked about how he wrote down Plato's speeches. Wrote down Socrates' speeches. We talked about how he started his own school, the academy. And that was to train government leaders. Train government leaders. And he wrote two famous books, The Republic and The Dialogues. Republic and The Dialogues. And then we talked about his student, Aristotle. Okay, so he was Plato's student. He wrote over 200 books. We know that he was obsessed with science, especially classifying plants and animals. We know that he added the hypothesis to the scientific method. Remember, we maybe last week, some point, I made you guys watch that horribly corny scientific method video. Okay. And then we talked about ancient Greek people. What would they be doing today? Okay, what would they be doing today? A couple of my projects have kind of asked that question. When we did the Myth Yearbook, we said, hey, these gods and goddesses and heroes and creatures, what would be a good modern job for them? In class, we talked about some of the historical figures as well. So maybe let me give you a couple examples. Right? A couple examples. So if we did a mythological character, maybe we would pick Hercules, okay, or as the ancient Greeks called him, Heracles. And I hope I spelled that right. And what would he teach? Well, if he was a teacher, he's known for super strength and his agility. So we could put phys ed, okay, physical education, right? And why? Like we said, his strength and agility. Okay. If we're going to pick maybe another person, we know that Aristotle is obsessed with science, right? So maybe we pick Aristotle. We could put he'd be a science teacher, right? Especially 7th grade science, he'd love that. And we could talk about his work with the scientific method, the books he wrote. Books. Okay. Another one we could pick, if we maybe go back to mythology, we could do, what if we picked, I'm trying to think of a good one. Ooh, I got a good one. Okay, I got a good one. What if we picked Athena, right? So she is the goddess of wisdom. She's really smart. In fact, Athens, they became great students because they're trying to honor her. So maybe if she's not a teacher, what if she was the librarian, right? So librarians are, I hope I spelled that right. She was the librarian, right? Because librarians are smart. They like learning. They got all the knowledge in the books and the online resources, right? And so maybe, like librarians help people find information and become smarter. Maybe Athena would be doing that as well, right? So she's the goddess of wisdom and knowledge. Okay, and that's just kind of an example. We filled up a bunch more, but just something you might be helpful, okay, to look at back at your study guide. Look at this guy right here, and just know some of these people down here, a handful of them, maybe 5 or 6 of them, and just know in general who they are, and be able to think about, if they're mythological, if they're real, if they were real, what would they be doing today? And then for some of the historical figures, what would they be up to if they were alive right now? All right, folks, as always, if you have questions, let me know. I'd love to help you. You can email me or talk to me in class. See you guys.